Shabbat Shalom to all. Good Sabbath. May you be blessed. May there be joy. May there be peace in your homes, in your hearts, in your world. May you be prepared for what's coming upon the face of the earth. May you be prepared for what's coming even this coming week as far as your own life goes. As far as everything that's happening, may you have shalom, may you have peace, may you feel comfortable in stepping forward into the next phase of your life. I have a few moments to talk to you. I want to just kind of start with this basic concept that there are said to be 4 realms in which we are designed by our Creator to exercise influence, to produce things, to cause things to change. We are given as catalyzing agents into this world in 4 different areas or 4 different realms. And the first realm is the realm of time. The Holy One, the Creator of the universe, has designed the world as we experience it into realms of time. And we have been given an allotted season of time to live upon the face of the earth, a allotted number of days to breathe the air and the oxygen of this earth, and to have some level of impact upon it. So what are the times? We have generations that we are born into. We don't get to choose those generations. Those are chosen strategically for us by the Creator of the universe to have an influence upon. So we are in a generation, we're in an age, and each one of us has an individual lifetime that we are called. This is the influence we are called to have in the realm of time. I'll let you sort out more about what that might mean, what your responsibility is to be an influence and a good influence that brings the kingdom of heaven influence into the realm of time. The second realm, though, we've got 4 realms, so I got to keep going. The second realm in which we are assigned to bring influence from the kingdom of heaven is the realm of physical space. Obviously, we are living in a finite world, and the Holy One has created this part of the creation. This part of the creation is finite. He has an infinite part of his creation that is the realm of heaven, but we live on the realm of earth, and in its solar system that we live in physical place. And everywhere the sole of our feet shall tread, this is the space we will have the impact. Every place where the sound of our voice, the waves, the sound of our voice travels, that is the area of space we can interact with and can influence. Then there are the realm of the lower created beings, the animals kingdom, the plants and the different trees and orchards and vineyards. These are the things as well as all the clean and the unclean animals, as we might want to call them. We have an ability to influence this realm of the lower realm of the created beings. And then we have the 4th realm, and the realm that we talk about most, because it's perhaps the most important, is the realm of humanity as a species, the realm of our ability to influence the direction, the value, the quality of interaction with the world of the species of humanity. We are called to interact with fellow human beings. We are not called to isolate and just live in an ivory tower or some sort of a walled cathedral or monastery where we interact only with the Creator of the universe. We are called to carry a good message of good news into the world to human beings as well as creation, which is one of the other realms. But as we relate to the other human beings of our world, we must decide how we're going to approach them and what our purpose and what our mission really is. If we have an idea that what we want to do is just get as much from the other people in this world. This is the narcissistic, I am not my brother's keeper approach that the world is so famous for, that most people in the world, in the secular, the pagan, and most religious communities in the world have. If you don't make me happy, you're of no use to me. If you make me unhappy, you are in danger of my wrath. You're in danger of my ridicule. You're in danger of my whatever negative thing coming towards you. That is the narcissistic, I am not my brother's keeper approach to the realm of our influence on humanity. But the Holy One has another way of responding, another vision, another perspective. And we've been talking about that some on some of counting the Omer meditations that I've done so far on the Facebook program. But basically it is the bone of my bone perspective, or the bone of my bone paradigm that he has introduced. Introduced it the first time 2 human beings talked, or the first time 2 human beings interacted. And that was in the Garden of Eden. There was Adam. and there was Hava. And the first words out of Adam's mouth were, "This is bone of my bone." This was not a matter of some sort of sexual attraction. This was not a matter of gender issues. This was a matter of the fact that humanity now, this first fruits of humanity that's come into being, is bone of his bone. Adam's bone. So if we look at that, this is no longer a situation where people are external to us, and whether they make us happy or don't make us happy depends on how we treat them. That is not the narcissistic, I am not my brother's keeper situation. What the Holy One has introduced to the bone of my bone paradigm is that this is actually an extension of me. And I cannot be at peace and well as long as that person who is part of me, bone of my bone, is not at peace and well. And I would not damage another person because it is bone of my bone. I would be... and I ought to have an autoimmune disease, as someone pointed out this week. You know, it is like you're killing yourself. You're eating yourself alive. Why would you do that to yourself? There are situations that come up, but this is the basic paradigm in which we're designed to influence humanity. So, if we have these levels of influence from time to time, the Holy One wants us to stop, take a deep breath, step out of our normal programming, the normal activities of daily life, and spend a few days reassessing, recalculating, as it were, and getting back into a proper alignment with His will for how we should influence and relate to time, and how we should influence and relate to space, physical, geographical spaces we live in or occupy, or our feet travel to. And it's physical and interact with and influence the realm of created order, the physical, the lower realms of plant life and animal life. And finally, we should reconsider, recalculate what kind of a level of influence and impact we are having on the race of humanity, the species of humanity, and in the times in which we live. What mark are we leaving upon the human species? Are we making it better for us being here? Or are we making it worse? Or are we making ourselves irrelevant to humanity because of our own self-interest? These are some of the issues that we think about during the period that is known in spring in the northern hemisphere. For you folks down in the southern hemisphere, my dear friends in the Philippines, my dear friends in New Zealand, and in sub-equatorial Africa, and the various other places, South America, my friends there, I bless you, and I'm talking to you as well because you get to experience this 6 months later in the other seasons. But here in the northern hemisphere, we're dealing with springtime, seed time, in other words, and what we sow, then what will be what we reap. And so we're going to discuss today, at least that's my goal, may the Holy One be willing, and may technology cooperate, is to discuss this period of stepping aside out of the normal activities that we do this time of year. And we do it again in the fall for the northern hemisphere, and what is then springtime in the southern hemisphere. We do it twice a year. And these two are supposed to counterbalance each other and keep us in alignment with the will of the Creator of the universe. That's what the seasons of the Torah are all designed to do. Now, we have to contrast this somewhat, I think, it's good to, with the holiday system of secular and religious men. These are what the Holy One has designed in His calendar are not holidays. They're not days to take off work and go party, although we should not work on certain of these days. It's not that. It's not a work cessation for the sake of going on a vacation, taking a road trip, getting the family together to watch sports or movies. This is not that. This is not a time to have religious meetings, big religious meetings that make us feel good or talk about concepts and abstract ideas and use cliches and catchwords that get us all fired up when we have no real idea what they mean. No, this is something else. The calendar of the Holy One and the special appointed times that He has assigned, which we're in the middle of in the springtime for the northern hemisphere, the fall in the southern hemisphere. These times are times when we are designed to actually come before the Creator of the universe, come into His realm, come into His courts, come before His face, and realign, to shed things that are inconsistent with being in His glory and in His presence and in His majesty and in His goodness and in His holiness, his kedusha. Shed aside those things. And it's a challenging thing to shed the things of the world that we have picked up. We have become corrupted in many situations. Almost every day we get corrupted by something from the world, something from our flesh. Fires up, hormones kick in, moods, attitudes, emotions get out of control. These things corrupt the spirit within us and make us unable to fully appreciate being in the presence, before the face, in the holiness of our King. And so we have to shed those things, and we have to put on instead the antidotes to those corruptive influences. The Holy One knows what our corruptive influences are. He knows what our 5 holes in our soul and every other corruptive issue that we face is. And so he gives us an antidote, a thing we can put on to ourselves, to take into ourselves and begin to flow with, to cover us, to prepare us to deal better in the next coming days, next coming season, with the things that corrupt and have corrupted us in the past, the things that have triggered us in the past in our flesh. Those things, he keeps giving us antidotes and feeding us those things. So this is the season we come apart. We come to him, and it is not about having a nice, enjoyable day, driving through the mountains or going to the sea, or taking our families together and watching a football game, a basketball game, a baseball game, a cricket match, a tennis match, a rugby match. Isn't that. This is not a time to entertain ourselves. This is a time to appear before our King, our Creator, and let him fine-tune us again. So we are in those seasons. What are we in? Well, what has just happened to us? What has just happened to us on earth? What on earth has just happened? Well, we have just commemorated the evening of the Pesach, of the passing over, of the Passover, it's called. It's just a few hours, about 3 hours maybe, of season of time as the sun is going down and sundown and the light is fading on the evening of the 14th of Aviv, or Nisan, this first month of the year, of the agricultural year that the Holy One has given to us to follow. In those 3 or 4 hours, we find this waning of walking and straining ourselves away, weaning ourselves away from the world into the holiness realm, into a realm that's going to take us and absorb us, and begins to actually do it for 50 days, all the way to the season of Shavuot. So we have just come through the first thing. We came through the evening of Passover. And then we entered into 7 days of unleavened bread, Hag HaMatzah, or Hag HaMotzot, it's called in the Hebrew, but basically it is 7 days when we unleaven. We have to start stripping things away, as I mentioned before. If we're going to be in the presence of the King, if we're going to be in the courts of our glorious Creator, in the midst of his honor and his glory and his majesty, if we're going to be in that scenario, then we must. I'm having another one of those notes with it that's trying to tell me I have difficulty with my internet. But we must begin to shed the things that distract us from his presence and from our mission. And so, here we are. We're now in the 7 days. We just completed the 7th day of, we're actually in the 7th day, we've completed the 7th day of unleavened bread, and we're in another season. We open up, it's like kaleidoscope, or you telescope out, and you begin to find there's now 7 weeks. That first weeks of unleavening has now broadened into 7 weeks of re-leavening, of recalculating, of reassessing, and now taking into our being the antidote for all the corruptive influences that the world is going to throw at us. Because it has thrown at us. It will always want to throw at us. The natural of the flesh of our being, as well as the nature of the world around us in its fallen state, will always try to take us down this road of corruption. And so he's going to, over these next, we have now 42 days left. And then the day of Shavuot, or Feast of Weeks, we have these days coming up in which he's going to layer upon layer upon layer, day after day, portion by portion. He wants to begin to give us the antidotes that we'll need for the next season. Now, I want to talk about then the 7-week period of counting the Omer, as it's called, Sefirat HaOmer. Actually, it's not about counting an Omer. The Omer is something that corresponds to it. What we're counting, and we'll get to what counting may be in just a moment. I think that might be a misnomer. Counting something, or sethering something. We'll get to the Hebrew word safar, the verb root, in a few moments. But I want you to understand that we're doing something that looks like numbers to some people with regard to something, but it's not an Omer. It's about the days. We're counting 7 weeks, or 7 Sabbaths actually, and we're counting 50 days. This is from our discussion in Leviticus. We're counting 7 Sabbaths, or 7 weeks that ended in a Sabbath, and we're counting 50 days. Now let's go back to what counting might mean. Counting is not really counting in the way you think about it. Sefer is a Hebrew word which means to make an account of, or make a record of, or to do a bookkeeping entry. It's basically, if you think about a very similar sounding English word, cipher or decipher would be another way of phrasing it. And the idea here is that there is a code infused into these seasons, these days, and a code infused in these Sabbaths, or the 7 weeks that lead into it. And our job is to decode what has been coded into those 7 weeks, those 7 Sabbaths, those 50 days. Do you get it? What we're doing is we're decoding. We're taking on the wisdom of heaven with regard to the times in which we live, the places in which we interact with the world, the species of lower creation that we deal with, including the crops, the food, the animals, all those sorts of things, and our interactions with human beings as well. All people from family members to community, to marketplace interactions, to transactions by the roadway, on the sidewalks, as we walk down the road, also on the internet, through our digital footprint, all interactions with human beings. We're going to decode what these days have in store for us. We're called to do that. Sefirat Ha-Omer. We'll talk about what Ha-Omer may mean. But I want, before we get too deep into what it means, I want to tell you that there is a parallel 7-week period to this 7 weeks of decoding. A parallel 7-week period that comes in the fall. Or again, we changed that terminology a little bit for the folks in the southern hemisphere. And maybe in the winter and spring for them. But the parallel 7 weeks is the 7 weeks of Nachamu Amik, of comfort my people. Of comforting my people. The 7 weeks of consolation, it's often called. And that falls in what we would say in the northern hemisphere would be the fall, the autumn, during the beginnings of the week of our studies of the book of Deuteronomy. And it is the 7-week period that flows between the 9th of Av, the 9th of the month of Av, the 9th day of the month of Av, in which the temple was destroyed multiple times, and we began to have some of the biggest catastrophes of the covenant people's lifestyle and lifetimes ever. On the 9th of Av, we go from that moment for 7 weeks forward, all the way to Rosh Hashanah, as it's called in modern terminology, but basically biblically, Yom Teruah, the day of the trumpet blasts, the day of the deep inhalation and exhalation of breath from the heavens. Now, these 7-week periods are parallel. And if we don't understand that, we'll miss some of the point of what this season of this first 7-week period is all about. Because we have to know that this is a beginning, and that's a culmination. If we do not catch the anti-corruption procedures, protocols that he's trying to give us in this 7 weeks, we will re-experience again the full 7 weeks of crisis that took place and that led us to the 7 weeks of consolation in those days. All right. So I left out one little issue, and that was another day that we recently celebrated or recently observed, and that's the day is called First Fruits. First Fruits is a very interesting process. It's the day of cutting, the day of the first cutting. Chatzir is the Hebrew verb there. And I think this is a danger I see in the Messianic realm, or the people who come out of Christianity and try to jump into Torah and see what Torah, the Bible, really says. And I think the tendency, the inclination, is to take a day like First Fruits, Omer Akatzir, and to immediately transpose it into something they think they know, which is the resurrection of the Messiah, resurrection of Yeshua. And therefore they consider the first fruits to be parallel to, or just be a forerunner maybe. In some cases, I think it's all over with. It was fulfilled in some way by Yeshua arising from the dead on what they believe would be the day of first fruits. Now, the problem with that is it's all theological and it's all abstract concept. It's all very Western in its approach. The reality of the day of first fruits, of the day of first cuttings, is a prophetic for the future approach to life, changing your approach to look toward the future. The Omer, the first cutting, is about the fact that it is only the first cutting. Do you understand what I'm saying? The first cutting means there's another cutting. As a matter of fact, there's a season of cuttings that will take place. And so it's not just to focus on, okay, Yeshua died, he was buried, he resurrected from the dead, therefore this is the day of first fruits. Oh, no, you're missing the whole point. While that has some relevance to the day of first fruits, that is not the purpose of the day of first fruits, the day of first cuttings. The day of first cuttings is to change our function, to change our approach, change our attitude, change our perspective toward the days that are coming in the future. And the season that's going upon us and upon the face of the earth. In order to ration, to begin to strategically plan for the things that need to be done in the short period of time we have on this face of the earth to have influence in the four realms that I've mentioned earlier. This is a definite recalculating for us, and the pattern that we see is the pattern that we saw in Yeshua, but it is involving us today and every generation that has ever been born or that ever will be born. Our children, our children's children will be impacted by this and will be called to this level of recalculation, re-evaluation, redesigning, reprioritizing, and strategizing how we're going to interact with these four realms. Okay, I told you I'd talk to you about an Omer, because these days are called counting the Omer. Sefirat HaOmer, ciphering the Omer. So an Omer, Ayin, Mem, and Resh in the Hebrew language, if you get put those three concepts together, Omer. The first mention of that in Torah is found in the story of giving of manna in the first place. In Exodus chapter 16, verse 16 as we know it, there is this discussion of the fact that the Holy One poured out this bread from heaven, this something from heaven, manhu. What is it? Who is it that he poured out? What is this thing he's poured out? And it says that each man was to go, each person, each human being was to go forth and gather an Omer, okay, an assigned portion. Now, the interesting thing about an Omer, when you talk about anything, you know, the basic way of approaching any physical substance that we might use or carry with us is handful. So you have one handful and you have two handfuls, and if you're like most of us human beings, that's all you got. You only have one hand and two. You got a right hand and you have a left hand. If you're going to, you don't have to put that in a binding. You don't have to put that together. You can just carry them. If all you want is one handful or two handfuls, you can carry that with you back to the camp. But no, it said put it in a basket. So what is the Omer means more than two handfuls. In other words, three handfuls at the minimum. And there was a specific amount, a designated portion that's allotted, strategically designed to meet the needs of the person for a day. Now, if you were a father of a household or a mother of a household, you would have to gather more for your children, for your dependents. But each one would have the assigned portion. That's the Omer. And the Omer is more than you can carry by yourself. It's adding and binding up in the basket, that process. Now, I hope you can understand that this is Omer. Now, to compare it, you can get a picture of why there's an Omer, why what we pick up, what we carry with us, what we have our daily portion, our daily bread, is designed to be focused upon the Omer concept of one hand, two hands, and the third hand and bound together, is to look at the other very similar Hebrew verb, amar. That is same letters. Well, actually, it's not. The first letter in that situation is aleph as opposed to ayin. Otherwise, it's mem and resh, aleph, mem, and resh, as opposed to ayin, mem, and resh. Amar is the word that usually gets translated to speak. But what do you do when you speak? You don't say everything on your mind. You don't use all your vocabulary. You carefully measure and strategically plan what part of your vocabulary, what words you'll put together to release words in a way that will express your thoughts and intentions. That is very careful. That's Amar, and it's the same idea of Omer. In this case, it's not words we're talking about. This is provision. This is protection. This is the things that we're going to use to sustain ourselves and our family. So if we're going to prepare in this season of the Omer, then the idea is, can we carefully measure what we're going to need in the future days, and what our family will need, what our dependents will need, both physically and spiritually and in every other way, to prepare ourselves for the times to come. So now let's go back to the area of grain, the idea of grain. In grain harvest, and this the first harvest of every year is grain, second harvest is orchards and trees, fruit trees, third harvest is vineyards. And so we have grain fields, orchards, vineyards. This is the series or sequencing of harvest. Isn't the Holy One good that he has given us these multiple harvest seasons every year? And he's built that into the creative system of the earth, the ecosystem of the earth. And because we are made of that same substance, he has created in us this same sequence of harvest seasons. We should have a grain grain field parallels harvest. We should have an orchard season parallel harvest. We should have a vineyard season parallel harvest in our lives every year. Now, Omer is considered the equivalent of a sheaf of grain. A sheaf consists of 3 handfuls. Again, the one handful you can hold in this hand, the one handful hold you can get in the other, and then the third part, and it's all freshly cut grain stalks. So an Omer is 3 freshly cut grain stalks bound together. That is because, of course, 3 is the minimum number you can carry, or most maximum number you need to have to carry. So what are we expected to do? We are with the Omer, or during the season of growing grain, when our grain harvest, our first harvest of the season of the year, is coming forth in every way. We are to Safar HaShabbat HaShibiot. We are to Safar, remember the Hebrew word, we are to Safar 7 Sabbaths. And we are to Safar Chamashim Yomim. We are to Safar 50 days. Now, what does that mean? Well, the first time Safar is used in Hebrew, or in the Bible rather, is found in Genesis chapter 15:5. The Holy One's having a conversation with our ancestor Abraham, Uncle Abraham, and this conversation is about the seed that he's going to bring forth out of Abraham's loins, and the great nation he's going to build, and that sort of thing. And he says to him at one point that look up at the stars, look up the heavens. And in English we see, he says, count the stars if you are able to count them. Well, the word is safar. And the idea is not counting stars. It's a nonsensical idea. The idea is making sense of them, taking account of them, understanding what the stars are telling you, understand the meaning and the significance of the stars, understanding what the stars mean to us and how they impact the world. If you can understand this is safaring. So now we are to look at this. What do these days mean? What do these 7 weeks mean? What do those 7 Sabbaths mean? If we were to decipher them, code and decode, search out and uncover what each one means, what will we find? That is our job in this season. Now, with that being said, let's take a look forward. This is the Shabbat, the Sabbath of prophetic vision. It means we're going to leapfrog ahead before we really deal with what we're dealing with right now in our time, in the springtime season, and say, what is coming ahead of us? What are we preparing for? Well, to do that, we have to go into the book of Deuteronomy. We have to go into the Torah portion that we're reading at this parallel time in the fall. And that is portion of Parsha Re'eh, and the specific portion that we're assigned by the sages to focus on this particular Sabbath is Deuteronomy 14:22 through, I think it's the end of chapter 16. And this portion deals with a couple of issues, but it's part of a bigger discourse. I don't want to step back just for a second to tell you there are two major discourses of Torah. There are a lot of discourses, but discourse meaning an uninterrupted flow of divine speech. And the two primary discourses, and they're handled different ways. One of them is actually in the red words, the Holy One spoke and said to Moshe. The other one is Moshe repeating what the Holy One spoke and said. The first one is what we're in right now. It's the Kedusha Discourse. It begins right after the inauguration of the tabernacle in Leviticus chapter 10. It begins to tell us our purpose and goes all the way through Leviticus chapter 24. That's the longest uninterrupted discourse of divine speech in the Bible. We're in the middle of that right now in our Torah readings. And as we're taking a little break from that today, we're taking a break for this season of Sephirat Homework, of taking note of what the days are all about, getting recalculated, uncorrupting, getting in the presence of the Holy One, taking the infusion of holiness, and also the anti-corruptive software that He wishes to give to us. That's our season now. But what's up ahead? What lies a few months down the road? What is the corresponding discourse of Torah to the Kedusha discourse that we have right now? Well, beloved, that is what I call the Kingdom of Heaven Scented Society discourse of Moshe in the book of Deuteronomy. It begins with about chapter 11 or 12 of the book of Deuteronomy, and continues for chapter upon chapter after that. And that's right in the middle of that Kingdom of Heaven Scented Society build out a discourse of Moshe that reveals what we're looking forward to is the portion we're going to talk about today, which is Deuteronomy 14:22, and then all the way through 16. It is a foundational part of the Kingdom of Heaven Scented Society build-out protocol download. What are we supposed to do with the time in which we live? How are we supposed to influence and impact it in this first realm of influence, the times, the seasons? We are supposed to build a Kingdom of Heaven Scented Society, brick upon brick, place upon place, person upon person. What are we supposed to do with the realm of space, of physical geography, into every space which the sole of our feet shall tread, and which the sound of our voice shall carry? We are to begin to build, lay the foundations for, and build upon the foundations for a Kingdom of Heaven Scented Society. What are we supposed to do with the realm of creative order, lower and higher, the lower realm of the animals and the plants' life, and the higher realm of human interaction? We are supposed to build, lay the framework for, lay the foundation of, and build upon this Kingdom of Heaven Scented Society. That's what we're supposed to. By the fall, by the time of this, we should have really truly infused our entire spheres of influence, time, space, a lower created order species and higher created order species, including all of our human interactions, with a foretaste of the Kingdom of Heaven Scented Society that the Holy One intends to build upon the earth. He will have a messianic kingdom. The first fruit that we talk about many times is the first fruit of Messiah. And He will come back on the earth, and there will be a Kingdom of Heaven Scented Society. Now we're supposed to give a foretaste, a scent, a fragrance, a look, a glimpse at what that is to look like by virtue of the way we live upon the earth. If that's our calling, if that's where we're going, now it's important that we get all the Kedusha we can possibly get in the springtime and this early season of harvest. So that's what we're talking about this week. Now, that means that we are at a choice crucible. A choice meaning that we are in a situation where we can make some good choices to go forward toward that ultimate harvest that we're called to have, or we could make some bad choices and actually begin to sow tares that we consider to be our way of doing things. Religion, theology, philosophy, political theory, whatever it is, other things besides the King's plan, anti-corruptive virus process into the world. So now we're at a choice crucible as we are in the springtime. We still have a chance to affect the harvest. The grain harvest, the orchard harvest, and the vineyard harvest are all still within our ability to enhance or to detract from. Which will we choose? We're at a choice crucible. We must choose the way of the Holy One. We must not choose the way of the world. We must not choose the way of our flesh, our fallen flesh. We must not choose the way that our hormones are trying to make us go, or our emotions, or our moods, or our attitudes are trying to get us. We must not follow the multitudes or the crowds or the great numbers of political persons or philosophical persons. Or we must not cave in to the demands of our flesh or our appetites or our urges. These are not who we are. If we're going to come through the choice crucible and actually build into the world a foretaste of the kingdom of heaven, then we must make good choices to follow the way of the Holy One, not the way of the world, of our flesh, of the crowds, of the multitudes, or of the religions of this world, or political sciences of the world. We are ambassadors of the King of Heaven. We do not have freedom, nor should we desire freedom, to be as the rest of the world is, to think and feel and let ourselves cave into the negativity that the rest of the world does. We are called Deuteronomy 14:22 and all the way through 16. The first one is responsible stewardship of material things. Seeing the material things of the world not through selfish eyes of what can I get, how can it please me, how can I get more out of what I'm getting, and how can I accumulate more, acquire more, how can I keep other people from getting what I've got. No, responsible kingdom stewardship of material things. How are we doing on that? The world is telling us to, just get all you can. It's like we're like dogs. The flesh, the secular world, the religious world tells you be like a dog. And what do I mean by that? If you put a full bowl of food in front of a dog, what will he do? Will he take a few bites, enjoy it, and move on? No. Your dog will eat every last bite as fast as he can, perhaps out of fear that some other animal or dog or you are going to take that bowl away, and therefore will consume quickly without even tasting, without even enjoying what he's done, much less, and he'll actually make himself sick because he's eaten too much. If you put too much in front of him, he'll eat it right because it's gone, because it's there. So we're not to be like that. We are to be a responsible steward. We're to measure, to use an Omer mindset of a handful, and a binding, and another handful and a binding, and to bring it flies in the face of the world's viewpoints of how we should handle material things. The world tells you, the secular world tells you, the finance world tells you, you build an asset base, build yourself a bank account, a 401k, as a retirement account. Good luck with that today. But go do all these things, and this is the responsible stewardship of material things. And ignore the cries of the poor. Ignore your widows and your orphans and those people in your community who are in desperate need. Ignore that. Ignore the future. Ignore the fact that what's really going to happen is there are going to be multiple people that are going to come who will not have anything and you will need to provide for in the latter days. Now, I want to introduce, therefore, the idea of daily bread from the biblical context. Now, everyone knows that Yeshua taught us to pray, taught his disciples to pray, give us our daily bread. We forget the preceding verse. The preceding prayer. He said, your will be done, our Father who is the head of the heavens. Your kingdom come and your will be done. And then he says, on earth. On earth, as it is in heaven, of course. And then he says, give us our daily bread. Now, this idea of what's on earth and us taking daily bread from what's on earth and preparing ourselves leads to some other issues, not leading into temptation and forgiving our brother of sin and debts and all that sort of stuff. But let's just stick right now with the idea of daily bread. Where did it come? Where did Yeshua get the words? Where did he get the phrase? Well, it comes out of the book of Jeremiah and the experience of the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah was, as you well know, not a popular figure. in Jerusalem about the time of the Babylonian captivity. Before the Babylonians came and took over, Jeremiah was prophesying, this is going to get ugly, folks. The world around you, the system that we know, the life that we know is about to collapse around our ears. And Babylon has been appointed to come in and take over and discipline us and spread us throughout the entire world and sow us like seed throughout the entire world in the diaspora. And you need to get used to this idea. He was saying, and ready, get prepared, steel yourself, because the king of Babylon is coming and he will destroy everything you know and everything you hold dear. Your economic system will collapse. your political system will fail. Everything about you hold valuable and precious will be destroyed. The temple will fall, which is part of the process of the warnings of the fall. So we have this idea. What happened? Why does it got to do with daily bread? Well, because Jeremiah was not in favor with the king because of what he was saying, he was thrown into prison, and in the prison, he was given daily bread. He was offered whenever the king Zedekiah took over. The question was what he should do with Jeremiah. And basically, through some discussions, it was determined that he would stay in the prison, but he would be given in a time of siege, in a time of starvation and dwindling supplies, because a harvest of grain can only last so long. It's finite, and every day people use it for their daily needs. By the time the siege drags on for a while, you find out it gets less and less. You have less and less. But even in the midst of all that time of siege, the king Zedekiah decreed that Jeremiah in his prison would receive a daily bread. He would receive a portion of daily bread just as if he were on the outside and were able to get it for himself. This is the idea of daily bread. Now, what was the idea? He wanted just enough to keep Jeremiah alive, just enough to keep him going forward. Now, that's an interesting phenomenon. If you want to understand the times that are coming upon the earth, the times that are about to be released into your world, understand that God is providing for you to have daily bread because you understand you are going to need to stay alive. The idea is that Jeremiah was going to be the first fruits of a remnant. As a matter of fact, as soon as the Babylonians came and took over, and they destroyed the temple and whatever, they let Jeremiah out of the prison, and the governor that was appointed said to Jeremiah in chapter 40 of Jeremiah, he said, "Come with me to Babylon, or stay here, go wherever you wish to go. You're free, but make that choice." Well, he decided to stay at Mizpah, and he became the forefront, the model in the Bible of the remnant of the faithful people of God, who are provided for supernaturally, provided for despite their inability to do anything for it during the period of intense tribulation, during the period of intense siege work, whenever the economic system fails and the political system crashes and everything around you goes away. He is the first fruits of that. So this idea of daily bread is related to serving as a remnant people. Now, that being the case, while we still have food, while we still have supplies, while we're still living in the context of this grain harvest and the grains available to us, while we still have food on the shelves in the grocery stores, while we still have food in the cabinets and the cupboards, what do we do with it? How do we deal with things? How do we deal with the things that the earth has produced for us? That the Holy One has created the earth to produce for us. What do we do with our material goods? That's the challenge of chapter 14 and into chapter 15. There are certain things. He said, first of all, understand, and this is where we get to this idea of tithing. I love that, the maaser in Hebrew. This is not a matter of supporting a local church fellowship or a philanthropic organization or a charity. This is not that. This is not giving 10% of your income to help. This is about accounting, taking a portion, strategically planning the portion of grain that you're going to use, or the supply that you're going to use, for not only yourself but for others. And particularly, first of all, you want to do is honor the creator of the universe. with that. This is not about giving to some person or some ministry in that process. The idea of the Ma'aser in chapter 14 of Deuteronomy is about understanding that every portion first. So that becomes, and the idea of the tithe is rationing and protocols. Why eat the tithe? You go up to Jerusalem 3 times a year, and there is a particular sequence that's laid out as far as how we are to take these 10% tithe, the portion, this allotted portion of the produce that we make. We are not to give it away, so to speak, and put it in a checkbook and write a check. What we're supposed to do is actual physical things and go up to Jerusalem with them. And with them, we're supposed to fund the celebrations of the Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Feast of Shavuot, or Feast of Weeks, and also the Feast of Sukkot at the end of the year. And we're to give them to the poor and to the foreigner and to the ones among us who need them most, and also to the Levite and the Kohen. But the idea then is learning that we have responsibilities with the things that we are given. The material possessions that we have are not for us to consume of our own will. We are strategic, we're agents. We are responsible parties, stewards of these things from the Holy One. And remember, where are you with regard to your stewardship? What are you going to do with the increase, or the food that you're going to have, or the supplies, or the materials, or the vehicles, or the houses? What are you going to do with the land that you own? What are you going to do with the smallest little item, the paper clips and the sticky notes that you own? What are you going to do? How are you going to use? How are you going to use your computer? How are you going to honor the Holy One and to recognize that we're preparing to be a remnant in the world, and we do what we can do to provide for each person in times of the tribulation that's coming. Okay, so the other thing is to learn that the Holy One has great priorities for certain groups of people. What do we do with this tithe? We give it to the poor, we give it to the debtor. We have a whole sequence in chapter 14 and 15 about releasing debts, about learning not to be so obsessed with getting what's coming to us. But we have a strategic process to get what we need, but not to demand more than we're entitled to. And the whole idea of the 7-year release is in this process. This is a kingdom of heavens in its society we're looking at, when we're not focused upon just what we're out to get for ourselves. We're focused upon the better ecosystem management protocols, and especially considering the needs of the poor, the disadvantaged, the unfortunate, the disabled, and those who are not able to provide for themselves. Also, we see that there's a provision in here for the separation of the firstborn of the herd and the flock, and in the provision, if there's a defect in that firstborn, to make sure that the poor and the needy and the widow and the foreigner eat of that, have that to eat of. That's part of their provision. These are, do you understand? We are our brother's keeper. Please. This is the idea of the Omer. We go back to the issue. What did Cain bring when he said, "I'm not my brother's keeper," or "Am I my brother's keeper?" He asked the question. He had brought an Omer. He had brought a mincha. He had brought a portion of the things that God had produced, but he did not have the idea that he was also a steward of the humanity of the people that were in his life, and so therefore he did not accept the idea that he was responsible for more than just doing a religious duty and giving a gift, which the Holy One did not need, just because the gift is supposed to awaken the heart, the spirit of the individual, not to somehow satisfy the bloodthirst, or the need of God. And so this idea of recognizing we are our brother's keeper, that we are bone of his bone, that we have a responsibility to see other people not as what they can do for us, or what we are afraid they might do to us, or how they impact us politically, emotionally, religiously, any other way, how they make us unhappy or happy in those regards, how they can fulfill our fleshly needs or make our fleshly needs worse. We're not supposed to look at people like that, because we're people of the kingdom of heaven, and we're building a remnant society, and we're building a foretaste of the kingdom of heaven scented society upon the earth. So therefore, we look at material things and we look at people much different. The second theme, the second factor that we talk about in the Deuteronomy season is a section, particularly in chapter 16, in this Kingdom of Heaven Synod Society protocols, is reminder to stay in rhythm with divine timing. Chapter 16 is all about what times and seasons the Holy One has decreed, about our 3 pilgrimage trips up to Jerusalem, and it's about the idea of what unifies us. Jerusalem unifies us. I know in this world with the seculars and with the humanists and with the political theorists, Jerusalem is the most divisive idea, concept in the world. But Jerusalem is not a concept. It is a place that a beacon is set there. The presence of the Holy One calls his people, the remnants all over the earth and the seed all over the earth to come back. This unified idea of we're going up to Jerusalem. As last spring we said in the 3-hour or so's of the Seder, of the Passover, of the remembrance with our children of the Passover evening, was next year in Jerusalem, right? The idea of Jerusalem, the beauty of Jerusalem, the reality of Jerusalem, the spiritual Jerusalem above and the natural Jerusalem as it reflects the beauty of that spiritual Jerusalem, even now, the little bits and little pieces of it that do. That is supposed to be one thing that unifies. All of us should love Jerusalem. All of us should hunger to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year and not go empty-handed, is what he says. Now, he starts out by saying that you are to shamar, treasure, cherish, keep the month of Aviv, the whole moon cycle that we're in right now. And we're getting towards the end of that moon cycle. We got just another week of that moon cycle. But we're supposed to treasure, and something's supposed to happen inside of us, and we're supposed to take real caution and care to treat this moon cycle, the cycle of the phases of the moon, as special, and so to draw down the special holiness that comes with this beginning of the year, this first month, and the month of Passover, and the month of unleavened bread, and the month of beginning the counting, or the Sephirah Omer. So we shamar Aviv. The second thing it tells us to do is to safar the Sabbaths and the days of the Omer, of the grain harvest. To take careful note, to in the season that's coming, when there will be a finite, seemingly finite amount of food available to us that seems to be dwindling every day, to know that there is another Omer that comes from heaven, that falls from heaven, that also we are to be very responsible to allocate wisely and use in the proper way. All right. Now, the third thing is to remember this pilgrimage for communal rejoicing. The pilgrimage for communal rejoicing. We're not to rejoice together, separately rather. This is not where we go to a church service or go to a camping trip and go with a bunch of other people camping. This is about the nation focusing on its national identity, about us being who we were created to be as a people, not about us having a good time with our families, although that should happen. We should totally rejoice with our families and with the neighbors, with the poor people that we bring with us, with the foreigners, with the servants that come along with us, those who are not able to go and afford it by themselves. We use this extra provision that he's given to us to be able to do that. These are important. And if we don't get the themes of these individual pilgrimage festivals of the unleavened bread season, of the Shavuot season, and of the Sukkot season, then we will not be able to impact our realms that we're assigned to realms the way we're called to be. We'll do it in a religious way. We'll do it in an artificial way, as a hypocritical way. We'll do it from a political standpoint. We'll do it from some sort of a theoretical standpoint. We won't have a real, meaningful impact upon our time, upon our generation, upon our space that we infiltrate, the place where the sound of our voice goes and the sole of our foot treads. We won't have a positive impact, a kingdom impact upon that. We won't be producing a remnant protocol. We won't be preparing the Kingdom of Heaven Synod Society framework and our groundwork in that process, and also with regard to human beings. We will not take appropriate actions toward human beings. We won't measure and train our attitudes to see them as bone of our bone. Because, you see, We'll be caught up with the corruptive influences of the world. We'll talk like they talk. We'll talk like we heard on the latest news broadcast. We'll use the same kind of derisive language and critical language. We'll judge. We'll be offended by. We'll be repulsed by, or we'll be drawn to and adulate over human beings and what they've done, or groups and what we think they've done. We'll use cliches instead of using real, true, revelatory words. May it never be. May it never be. Well, this is the lessons of the season that we're in. I pray that something that was said today, some words that were spoken, begin to awaken in your spirit this hunger to go up to Jerusalem, but beyond Jerusalem, to go into the very presence of the Creator of the universe, and to let Him peel off of you, layer by layer, all bad attitudes, bad approaches, bad viewpoints and paradigms of humanity, bad vocabulary, bad phraseology, all these things that are negative and corruptive that you got from the world. Peel those off and begin instead to take into yourself the holiness, the beauty, the majesty, the wisdom, the strategic planning of the Creator of the universe, who has designed your life for such a time as this to impact the realms. Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you next week as we restart our Torah portions. We'll be doing Akari Mot next week.